Eric, I have to tell you something.
I'm ready. I can listen. Good news, bad news, all ears.
And I'm doing this publicly because I think that is the only way to really air out personal grievances. And that is, the cult gives because we give to the cult. It's a symbiotic relationship. And I posted a photo recently, like a physique photo, and I referenced you because someone said, which is the truth, about you winning the 2019 River City Royal Rumble Classic. And they're wondering if I would represent the cult by maybe competing in that place and time, 2022, 2023, to kind of hold that torch, the proverbial torch. And I said, only if I thought that I could win and thus we could be double champions. So we have both people, dual champions, co-hosting the greatest podcast.
Billy and Jimmy Lee, Double Dragons.
No, you didn't just say that.
Both having won the River City Classic. I'm not mad.
It's like Conan the Barbarian, where it's like, I see a standard with two serpents, where it's like they're ruling at the same time.
Exactly.
Double Dragon 2, lovely reference, the revenge. Wow. So that got me in a good mood because the cult's always bringing that heat. But Eric, I'm going to read a comment because I reference us, the hunks, together. And basically, this is what the individual said. So I'm just going to read it to you, Eric, and I want you to react just right off the cuff. React, don't think, don't reflect, just go for it.
So to be clear to the listeners, you want to be watching this because we have done it.
Yeah.
We have stooped to the level where we are doing reaction videos to stay relevant. All right. So this is a live Eric Helms reaction to reviews being read. All right.
Okay. So thank you. So that person, very nice. We all got together, the cult, the idea, right, of participating in this culture that we all love, winning some trophies. Amazing. Okay. This other person, his name is M.E.M. Cockburn. That's true. Said, you and Dr. Eric Helms are my favorite woke socialist beta male lame comedian lifters / podcasters.
Well, I mean, my live reaction to that is thank you. Anytime I get a compliment that, because it's tough to read context and humor online. So I'm just going to take this for what it's worth and just be appreciative. There's a lot of people out there who think, being beta is a bad thing. Yeah. Let me just say, aren't we past that misogynist bullshit? I mean, we're not a pack of wolves, right? Why do I need to be alpha? Those people have heart attacks.
Eric, I'm going to stop you right there because I love you. Okay. No, I love you.
All right.
Okay. We rule this cult with the iron fist. And what I want to say to this little lifter where, your profile is private, we can't even see it, is that we're offering no refunds because I could tell what happened. He participated in the Masculinity in Crisis Tour. We were there, the standards, atop the pyramid, ruling, and he was emasculated. And that happens. So to save face, which is a very beta thing to do, he had to say something passive-aggressive to the leaders. And I think the only way of really rectifying this, truly rectifying it in an objective way, would be a pose down. Not us posing down next to him, but we're there. We're kind of in a picture, folks, a pedestal where we're higher than him. He's kind of at around hip height, and he's posing. He's in the nude. Now, of course, because we need to judge the entirety of the physique. Eric is going to judge the musculature.
So his hips are our head height, just to clarify?
No, unfortunately, his head is at our hip height.
Okay, his head is at our hip height.
Yes. In fact,
it's just like any bodybuilding show, really. It's
right.
What stages do. It means nothing. It's just a reference point for the listeners to understand where we are in space. Okay.
Thank you.
If you read into that, you're gross.
Yeah. We need to see the right angles. Anyway, so we're viewing atop. He's down below. Because he's nude, you're obviously reviewing his musculature. I'm reviewing his manhood. And then we'll just come up with a composite score. And depending upon if it's a pass or if it's a fail, we'll determine whether or not he retains his Iron Cult membership. I think that's most just, most fair, most objective.
Evaluate the member to evaluate the membership.
Thank you. Yeah. And I've seen a lot of members, so I think
it goes hand in hand, Omar.
Some would say hand in hand. I mean, there are ways for him to try and appeal to the leaders, right? Because it's not just like a linear competition, right? I like to think there's artistic expression therein. So we give you kind of the platform, and it's what you do with your performance that'll ultimately determine where you are in the standing. That's all.
It's like a casting opportunity.
It's a casting opportunity.
Right. You know, and if he gets tired, is there a place he can sit down?
So there is a comfy couch. It kind of looks well worn, and that just it makes it just really ties the room together. And I want to say though, Eric, because maybe I'm saying this, and maybe there's a slight hint on my end of being passive aggressive, and I do love comments like that. Genuinely, I think they're funny because I'm really avoiding the actual topic, Eric, which is yes, I'm going on to another tangent. Folks, I have the breaking news here. And so we had to, and that was the easiest prey that I could kind of latch onto. I have terrible news. Myself and Eric have been referencing a particular movie that apparently is not called by this name. And we have put it into the ether so much, into the universe. We've spoken truth, right? This magic, this beauty into the universe that in fact, I think it's Netflix, it's a big studio, is releasing a movie with our name, and we're not getting any credit. Eric, do you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, there's now an actual movie called Stuck Together coming out on Netflix.
What the fuck? So, in case, just to catch everyone up real quick, and then we're doing...
You got to give them the lore. You got to give them the Iron Culture backstory.
Yeah, and then this is all integral to what we're talking about because it's a year in review. We're reflecting on ourselves, our personal lives, so we're sharing some details. Can we get a little candid for a second? Apparently when Joe Rogan does it, everyone loves it. And then when we do it, they're like, hey, what about the science? And I'm like, well, this is the science of us. So
that's right.
We referenced probably 100 episodes ago, and it was the right name for it. A classic comedy that no one seems to remember that stars Matt Damon and the other guy. We haven't figured out the other guy's name still 100 episodes later.
Isn't it Owen Wilson?
I don't no, I thought that too. It's a guy. He's so forgettable but memorable in this film.
That's all right. I know we're both in our 30s, but we have the internet. So you keep talking, and I will confirm who the other guy is.
So the brief synopsis, so I've never watched it, also, true confession. But the synopsis, as I understand it, is that they are either surgically paired together, so they are stuck together. The film is called Stuck on You. But in reference to us, the cult, we would say, Eric or myself, we are stuck together. Myself and Eric...
It's not Owen Wilson.
It's not. Yeah, what's it? I can't even remember the guy's name. I know
it's Greg Kinnear.
Right. He was in a film with Jack Nicholson and then a bunch of others.
Let me just say, though, Stuck on You with Matt Damon and Greg Kinnear, wouldn't it be better if it was stuck together with Matt Damon and Owen Wilson? I feel like that'd be a better movie, objectively. Okay,
so we're just giving multi-million-dollar ideas here, and that is why we have no money, Eric. That is why this podcast... basically, we're funding it on our own. And I will say this. So it crushed my heart. So I apologize to Mr. Mem Cockburn for taking out my anger on you. It was unjust. It's largely because we feel impotent in the face of Netflix, this multi-billion-dollar company just swooping in, stealing not only the name, I could only imagine, Eric, it's one of our many unfinished, not even worked at all scripts, but conceptually we had it, we're united together in it. Of Stuck Together. So it just hurts, man. It just hurts to see your art stolen.
It hurts to see your art stolen, but I also feel almost justified that we are actually molding reality.
It's true.
Like we forced with just sheer willpower, some might say ignorance, and saying the wrong thing on a podcast of actually, but I say willpower because it sounds better. Yeah. Of actually changing reality. And now Netflix went, that is a movie title. Everyone else is like, no, you guys got it wrong. You got half of the actors incorrect. 1 out of 2, 50%, that's an F. Yeah. And that's not the title of it. You just changed it. We say, now there is a movie called Stuck Together. You're welcome. And we are masters of the universe, like two He-Men holding arm in arm. Power of Grayskull. And it reminds me actually of how, like, there's these things that everyone collectively believes to be true that are slightly wrong. Like the quote from Star Wars that isn't a quote, Luke, I am your father. Yeah. When the actual quote is, no, I am your father. And people will be like, they'll argue with you. They have memories of actually hearing, Darth Vader say, Luke, I am your father. Or the Genie movie that Sinbad was in that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was actually I think there was just one with Shaq back in the day. And for some reason, everyone thinks there was two. There was one with Sinbad and one with Shaq, but that movie actually doesn't exist. We had a huge crisis of reality on one of our 3DMJ team meetings. We were supposed to be talking about like the lifting library and our athletes, but you're welcome, 3DMJ athletes. We didn't discuss your issues. Instead, we discussed a fictitious movie that never existed by iconic 90s comedian Sinbad. So there you go.
Sinbad was in some stinkers. He was occasionally funny. I also find what's hilarious to me, a few different things, Eric. One, that not that people thought maybe that film was real because it sounds plausible, but maybe confusing Shaq and Sinbad, like they look nothing alike. But not only that, you know what they call it, Eric? They call it the Mandela effect, which what's crazy to me.
Yes, the Mandela effect.
Because it's about Nelson Mandela. The people believe that he never existed just because it's outside of their worldview. Well, I am part of the conspiracy because when he came to Toronto as a wee lad, so I could be one of the people that was like, I was there. I remember there is a person there where people are just convinced because it's, outside of the worldview. Something very interesting for you, Eric, and I think for the cult too, when we talk about shaping the nature of reality, which is kind of what we do. We disseminate information, philosophy, the science, is that it's not, by far not his best film. John Carpenter, he's my boy. I love John Carpenter. It's called In the Mouth of Madness. I think you'd find the premise intriguing. Oh, you've seen it. Okay. Because myself and Eric, we bonded over Hereditary. It is a next level concept. Conceptually, I like it. Or there's a Stephen King-esque author that he's so prominent, so prevalent that and influential that he begins shaping reality and actually shaping reality. And so it's the idea of like, what is reality? Is it an agreed upon set of parameters that people just, assume then to be true? Very, very interesting. He didn't have the budget to execute it. Fun fact too, also, Eric, and then I'm really getting into this topic. One of the scenes at the start is right near my house where they film it in the beaches in Toronto. It was filmed in Toronto, dude, which is kind of cool to me because the place that they filmed the psychiatric ward is actually right in the beaches where you and I, we went there, we walked there when we went out to dinner and so forth. And so I know that shot from the outside. So it almost makes it seem more real, the film, just because I see those sets and I'm like, oh yeah, like I know that location. Yeah.
That's perfect. And we've had many a Lovecraftian shout out here on the cult. So the Mouth of Madness is perfect. But yeah, Mandela effect. Interesting stuff. If you have never heard of it, Google it and just type into Google, the Google machine. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Examples of Mandela effect, and you will have many of the things you believe to be true about reality shattered, and you'll never be the same.
Eric, so I'll go right to the topic then. One of the ones that would shock most people is they think we've been married, but it turns out we have not. Yeah, like if you just search Iron Culture, it's like Iron Culture episode whatever, like the third most searched result. Iron Culture, Eric Omar, marriage. Like, because everyone assumes there was this episode, like, I don't know if you remember, it's like episode 47 or something, where we said some vows or something, like the death do us part, and like it just was a thing, and then it was assumed standard that we're like really united, like the standard together. Yeah.
So you've actually typed it so many times into Google.
Someone, Eric, let's be clear. Someone
has typed it so many times into Google that it's actually impacting Google more broadly.
Yeah.
Not just on your browser history.
Not my local search result. No,
that's another example. Molding reality. So hey, that's I think, folks, really, if this doesn't prove The Secret to be true, I don't know what does. That's right.
You're throwing out energy.
Put it out there. And if one day I wake up and we are married, I turn over and it's not Barb there, but it's you, then you know what? You deserve that reality. Nice. Because you put in a lot of willpower for that to happen.
Eric, you just turn over and look at me and you're like, Omar, you crazy bastard. And then a slow smile creeps up. And then it's a horror film because then you're like, but what about Barb? And then, like that's the cut.
Omar, you son of a bitch.
So I do think this is completely related to the tonic that we're talking about, reflecting on this year, because some people we enjoy, we're actually friends. Like, I joke about that, but on YouTube, on social media, I don't think people would be shocked at hearing this, but the amount of people that obviously do collaborative efforts together because it's mutually beneficial from a financial standpoint. But when I say they're not actually friends, I don't mean that there's anything nefarious or that like they hate each other, but it is purely a mercantile exchange. It's the understanding that I have a following, you have a following. we decided from the very inception, Eric,
Omar,
here. Yeah.
Speaking of reality crumbling before us, are you suggesting that the cast of Friends didn't actually hang out like that in real life? Because if that would ruin my entire mid-90s experience, and I don't know if I'm comfortable with that.
So I guess then I can't even address it. My big question for sitcoms like that, Eric, is always, they're like working stiffs. They're young individuals trying to make it in a big city that is one of the most expensive cities in the world. And their apartments always look incredible. Like, imagine if they put a real, like a scenario of Friends, like, yeah, I'm a waiter, I'm a this, I'm that, in New York. Like, we're talking probably 250 square feet. Obviously, they need a big open set so they could film it, the dynamics, but the amount of like financial insecurity every single character would face would be soul crushing every episode. You know what I mean, Eric?
Yeah, no, it's not accurate by any means. Yeah, especially not with like what is I forget the blonde, the taller
Phoebe.
one. Like, she's just a musician, if I recall correctly.
Yeah,
she plays in that same cafe only.
Yeah,
like an acoustic guitar, and she's not good. She'd be so broke.
Yeah,
Like,
she's
broke.
the most broke. So either her parents are like sending money, or someone like a benefactor, mysterious benefactor. No, it's 100%. Now, I do think this is all related because we're reflecting. I said we're friends. We're also talking about aspects or artifacts of the cult's past, and this is the episode of reflection for the year, right? Kind of what we learned or what we rediscovered, just thoughts from 2021. Kind of like 2020, which I'm proud to say, man, we're now on our third year. We're wrapping up the third year of Iron Culture. A lot has transpired. It's also crazy for me to think, Eric, if we were to split the timeline of the cult up until this time, we've recorded more episodes, not just more episodes, but the majority during COVID, during the pandemic. Where if I was to say to you, like, oh, March 2020, and now we're in December 2021, that's well over half of them. So that's pretty crazy to me that, one, people are obviously still listening, because I know even here, like, gyms are open here now, but some lockdowns are happening again. You have, I want to hear about you, man, like where your goals are, and then as a proxy for people to understand maybe some of their own goals. But people still tuned in, like when we had that episode, like what to do when the things lock down. So it's kind of wondrous to me. It's like saying, okay, I'm going to be a Phoebe, right? I'm going to be a live musician, and I'm starting it during the pandemic. Like, that's kind of what like Iron Culture did, if that makes sense. It's like, we're on episode 18, the world shut down, let's keep going. And we gain this audience through that time. So we're live musicians and we can't play live.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, this is episode 150. This is the last episode of 2021. And it does make you just kind of look back and shake your noggin and just say, whew, you just can't expect what's going to happen in the world. Omar, how do you make God laugh? How do you make God laugh, Eric? You tell him your plans, Folksy wisdom. That's what's going on in the history of Iron Culture.
Eric, real quick, I want you to continue, bro. Imagine, like, we actually become the thing that we despise the most. We're like 30 years from now, we're still doing the Iron Cult. Some like members have dwindled down to nothing, and as you said, we're just dispensing like folksy truths that like kind of sound right, but there's nothing underneath it. Just like,
oh yeah, like we're playing our greatest hits. We haven't had a actual new quote unquote episode. Like not even like Ben Esgro or like Jeff Alberts or Alberto Nunez will come back on. We definitely can't get the mask guys. They've changed the contract with me. It's like we will not do appearances outside of. We have just a couple other burned out guests who feel indentured to us, or maybe just sad for us, and they're just being nice to keep us relevant.
pity guess.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, Gabrielle
category.
Fendero just can't say no. She feels terrible for us. She's like, sure, guys, I'll talk about diet culture
Eric's
again.
was just too nice to me back in 2020, so I'll come back on in 2030. Yeah, she's moved on, Anyway, but yeah. So I think I think legitimately there was a time point probably in 2019 where we first started. I guess it actually was in late 2018 when we started, wasn't it?
Technically, yeah.
Yeah. Where we had actually planned on maybe like a good third or a quarter of our episodes being live. Like when I came out to compete in 2019, we recorded a bunch of episodes. We got Alan Thrall, we got Silent Mike on, we got Jim. We had in person Chip Conrad.
Randall Shawson.
Randall Strawson, thank you. So we just hit up that whole area, and we had planned on doing things in the Bay Area as well, traveling. You know, and you were going to come out right before the COVID pandemic became, you know, a big issue to come do a strongman competition in New Zealand. And I guarantee you, I would have, you know, all the people who we had like half in person, you know, a lot of the great New Zealand lifters we've had on, like Evie, we could have hit up some of the gyms around here, talked to some other folks, you know, Brett Gibbs, we've had them both on. You know, like all of that stuff was planned to be in person. And then we were wanting to go to things like the Arnold, and, you know, other big competitions in the iron game across multiple disciplines, interview winners, things like that. And obviously, none of that happened. You know, we didn't get to go to IPF Worlds together, which was the plan as well, and interview a lot of those folks after the strongman competition. So, yeah, and it hasn't been bad. You know, like we had some lofty goals, and we had planned to do them, and, you know, for obvious reasons, 2020 and 2021 basically shut that down. But I'm still pretty stoked about the content we've had, who we've had on, and how it's kind of affected I would say the trajectory of both of our like careers and what we're trying to do and the impact we've had. You know, like if we go back to me in say mid 2018, there was no like regular outlet for me to share my thoughts on broader stuff related to the iron game. Like you could absolutely find me on the 3DMJ podcast regularly talking about like competitive natural bodybuilding, or being like the perennial guest on every other podcast on the Sun. And, you know, but like my appearances on YouTube, on the 3DMJ YouTube, they've been like few and far between. I normally do like a 6-part series every couple of years. You know, there's the pyramids, and then I did like Say What, Science and Application with Eric Helms, and then I did Anecdotes and Observations. So like I've had these things where I'm like, I have a desire to keep sharing my thoughts on things with people, but I've never really had a good platform where I felt like I could consistently put it out there on all the breadth of stuff that I'm interested in the iron game, which is, as people know, relatively broad. So iron culture has been exactly that, which has been really cool. And I have you to thank for that, my friend, for just reaching out and being like, hey, we should collab. And I was like, on what? And you're like, I have no idea. And I was like, sweet. Well, what if I could do anything? What would it be? And then it eventually became this. So,
no. Yeah. You know what it was, Eric, the epiphany that I had, and we've shared this before, but it is worth repeating. When you came down, we had that Kaizen project where the nutrition courses that you did with Kaizen. And we finally met up after interacting for several years. And just seeing your presence on camera, and this can't be understated because there is a difference. It is a pressure scenario, whether people admit it or not. What a lot of people do when it comes to YouTube content creation is that they will neatly plan, obviously, and I think that's ultimately a better way of doing things, right? So you'll plan out the segments. You'll probably record, if you see a 10-minute video and there's 30 camera cuts, each of those camera cuts, there's probably 3 to 5 takes at minimum, right? So you're stitching together content. It is very, very directed with the way that you want to do things. And there's something to be said. So a podcast is often, in my opinion, the best ones. And that's why we joke about like Joe Rogan and whatnot, not even his podcast, but the ones that people tune into. They are conversations that could go anywhere and everywhere. They're improvisatory. So it means that you can kind of throw out an idea, the person picks it up, like Eric picks it up, and then we riff off it, we go on to something else. And so it has a musical language to it. And it's a language that actual dialogue has. Now, some people are attracted to the more regimented. So it's like a rigorous, well-documented, there's A, B, C, D, E. It's like reading an article out loud. It's almost like an audiobook, right? So you have like, here's the statement, here's the thoughts. And there's a time and place for that. Like Eric's in academia, you're a part of mass. You publish these things where if you want like kind of the holy grail, right? The Rosetta Stone on this topic, that's where you go to find it. But there's something to be said where a lot of these ideas, the foment of them, come from these conversations. So what I noticed, Eric, when I saw you and you're talking in front of the camera, I said this before, that talking in front of the camera is a pressure environment because whether or not people admit it, the camera's kind of staring back at you. It's giving none of the feedback. So we talk, like I see Eric's eyes, I see them light up. I see him say, don't bring up the marriage thing again, bro. Like I see it in his eyes, right? So it's instantaneous feedback. You're playing off of one another. When you talk to a camera, it's a pressure scenario because it could feel cold, removed, judgmental. I've seen, and I'm not even being cruel when I say this, not people that are inexperienced, people that are experienced YouTube content creators freeze on camera, and that's fine. It's normal. So I was like, the first thing that I did a bunch of micro evaluations, not even intentional, with Eric. I was like, he's very good on camera. Like he's cool under pressure. Obviously, your diction, your intonation, everything that comes together to be seen as not only an authority figure, but someone who is speaking with confidence was all right there. So I was like, okay, you're great in front of the camera. Obviously, goes without saying, you know the material, but you also like to conversate.
I thought I spotted you evaluating my diction.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was off to the side. It was, so you were facing the camera and I was just like off to the side. It was like a silhouette. I just prefer, right? Okay. It's artistic. Think of the silhouette. Now, I saw, it's like, you know what? We would film and then we would go back and we would have these conversations. And I thought to myself, that was the kernel. I'm like, some of these conversations in ways, they're obviously looser, more informal, but there's so much inside this that you can't like capture in a 5-minute video. Like it needs that time, because sometimes like we have a conversation, Eric, and we'll come back 30 minutes later, we have a guest on and you bring up a question that you didn't have it that minute when the person said something, or maybe they kept going down a path, but you knew like, one, for the cult, for myself, this needs to be answered. And so I think you've always needed a place to express these ideas in a format where the constraint is not then what I would call the window dressings. And I mean, no offense when I say that, but when it comes to some YouTube content or the way people perceive content, it's by the fixing. So how nice the camera is, right? The angles used, the slick editing. So they're not actually absorbing the information, they're absorbing an experience. And there's a difference between being a content creator, which is a skill unto itself, and then being someone who can converse, who is knowledgeable, who is disseminating information. You can combine both of those. You can have separate skills. The skill of being a content creator is useful, but I think in the modern context of social media, supremacy is placed upon the window dressings, right? So people will perceive, once again, Eric, like the thumbnail, the title. Oh man, they filmed this in 4K. It just looks professional. So it's these insidious impressions for the lay person to come up with a composite evaluation of something. So you look at, like we look at it, Eric, it's like, oh, that person knows what they're talking about. We're not evaluating the content of what they're saying, but it's more the presentation. All that to say that I knew with Eric, I'm like, if we're to endeavor to do something new, what is something where that's not a rate limiter for us? It's like, oh, we're doing a podcast because we have Brandon he does a fantastic job with the audio. It's at least good enough. So it's not going to sit us out of the experience. And so you could just shine. Because on YouTube now, I'd say, the last thing I'd say, Eric, on YouTube now, there's like a barrier to entry. Like anything else, where like you need like maybe a year or 2 or 3 of experience to really, and there's a form you got to follow. Maybe if you don't, then you need an editor. Whereas a podcast, you can. It's one of those last free spaces, I don't mean that like ironically, where you could come in, develop an audience, people find you, and there's a flow to it. And the flow is basically almost your life experiences. Your life experiences as a lifter, as a coach, academia, and then your ability to convey these.
Yeah, we are the great grandchildren of radio, you know, going on from when there was no TV and that was the main medium of people consuming, well, anything media related, to then post TV, still having very popular talk radio, you know, and yeah, I think podcasts are just the internet version of that. So they ain't going nowhere, but I do think they are a very useful way of communicating information. You know, there's a lot to be said for the supposition that the natural learning mode for humans is oral storytelling, quote unquote, if you will, something that's part of, you know, pretty much every culture, and I'd say part of the human experience. So I think, I think you dissected that well. I found myself agreeing with everything you said, and it certainly feels like home to me. But yeah, it's pretty cool to see where this has taken us. Just to give a little spotlight back in your direction, can you drop a bit of a hint as to maybe what cool things have come out of iron culture for you that I am tangentially a part of?
No, Eric's part of it because he's my ride or die. And this is very interesting. We're going to get to the idea. This iron culture is kind of like Breaking Bad, where there will be an end, and that's a separate conversation, but I'm dropping that hit now. You see, you drop it, Eric, and then we're going to revisit because I know you're picking up what I'm throwing down.
Tugging at heartstrings.
Yeah, just the emotional heartstrings. But Eric is 100% correct. At the inception of iron culture, we called it iron culture. It wasn't like, you know, the strength and hypertrophy science podcast. Like if you wanted, I'm not even joking, and this is how I know Eric's one of my boys. If we were purely trying to appeal to the algorithm, you would name something where the search results, it would be more easy to come up. So you search on iTunes, strength podcast, then it's more likely to come up, right? And like people think, oh, that's it. It's like iron culture. It's like, it begs, what is that about? And if you're not in the know, if you don't live, you don't even know what that's about. Anyways, point is, we're about the life. We're kind of like John the Baptist in the wilderness, being that voice, crying out, dropping those knowledge bombs, where at the inception of iron culture, we wanted to participate in the culture. That's why it's iron and it's culture. And we wanted to do certain things, as Eric alluded to. So go to IPF Worlds, World's Strongest Man, us compete together, just like, participate in this sport that we love in the iron game. And so that was a long-standing plan. The pandemic threw a wrench in that. There still are plans, like maybe in 2022. I know we'll get Eric. I want to hear about those goals. But there was kind of a serendipitous occasion that occurred in 2021 where before I've been very fortunate being on YouTube over a decade, a few different opportunities for a few different reasons that I turned down for no good reason, actually, too. That, they say you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. It's true. And luck is kind of when opportunity meets that preparation. Something happened. It will be unveiled in January, but basically a major network was looking to produce a new show that was related to exercise, to nutrition, but also with a historical bent to it. The execs did an evaluation of who would be feasible to host this, to talk with authority that had it was personal, all those different things. And they narrowed it down. And I told them, and that's what I said, Eric, I said, hey man, look, I always real talk it. If I'm a guy number 4, right, on the couch, and basically guys 1 through 3 said no, and I'm and they said, no, you're absolutely, you're the first choice. Because, Eric, coming back to this, besides having the requisite knowledge and all those things to host it and whatnot, one of the things they evaluated, which is funny, this is where laziness came back to actually benefit me. Both of us could talk in front of the camera. You could give a topic and riff on it. A lot of YouTube content creators, they're very manufactured. So there's not an easy way of evaluating how good they are on camera. Because I'm telling you, this is kind of one of the tonics for this episode. There's a difference between talking with your friend at the gym and thinking wow, this is really intelligent what we're saying. We should convey this either on a podcast or on video. When you turn on the camera, when you turn on the podcast, it's like lightning in the bottle. You might not get it. Anyways, is that is long form without interruption, so the person could speak with authority. They're comfortable in front of the camera, plus the level of knowledge. All those things come together. All that to say, there is now a show that possibly might get picked up by the network proper on their TV. Who knows? In 2022, it is premiering on their YouTube streaming service, and then also Snapchat, which is funny. Which a shout out to the Snapchat gang, acquired it. But what I'm grateful for, Eric, we're able to take the show. They produced pitched the concept to me, the executive producer, awesome individual. We're able to reshape it into something that I'm very proud to participate in, where it does have the historical context of kind of lifting, different cultures that were fearsome warriors and what they would do, but also with a scientific edge to it, where we got the mass boys on. We have this stud right here, Eric Helms, dropping that wisdom. And that was one of the things I was proud of. I said from the inception, there'd be a few things I wouldn't compromise on, where if I wanted some of these guests, if I thought an episode would benefit, if we're talking protein and I want to talk to a protein researcher, just so you can hear straight from the person who did the research, recommendations, so that when we disseminate this knowledge to the masses, my belief has always been, as you percolate up or as scale increases, fidelity can decrease a bit. Like Iron Cult as an example, we have 25,000 listeners. Eric can go in, right? That's why we make that joke where we had Andrew Vygotsky. We're talking panation angles and just these things where it's you go 7 layers deep. When you are having something that potentially could be viewed by thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions, you do have to rewind it back a bit, what you're talking about, but it doesn't mean that the fidelity of the information could be incorrect. And that was one of the things that I stressed that they were very open to. And so Eric's on it too. He's going to be on this series, and Eric is going to continue to be on the series if it continues to be a thing. So just a very kind of weird where they pitched me, Eric, and it was kind of semi-related to things we've talked about before, something I'm interested in from a historical leaning. We both are, being amateur history enthusiasts. So just kind of wild, man. So that is why I've been partially absent on YouTube. We shot it. It was in Toronto. It took And then I've been helping with the post. There's 9 episodes. They're going to premiere January 8th. We'll have more to talk about when it launches, but kind of a wild thing. And it was amazing to have Eric on too, because it's just that little like cherry on top. I was like, oh man, we got. I'll drop it too. We got who? Eric Trexler on. Also, Eric, I could say we literally got everyone except the AI, because I just felt it would be too powerful if we had him on. I just like, it's like lightning. It's that lightning in the bottle. Like, will he go rogue? Will he take over the world? Is Skynet going to happen? I thought, I don't want to be the one. I don't want that to be the person. But we got Mike Zordos on.
That's right. So you've done a great job giving a lot of information without actually telling the people. Yeah. And I'm just going to summarize bullet points what you have disclosed, not adding any new information, because like anytime you do a relatively significant deal with a like a real company that is large and worth money and has existed for a while, there's an NDA involved, right? So I'm going to bullet point the things that Omar brought up without actually spoiling the plot, all right? So there is some entertainment channel. We can't say which channel, but it sounds like something historical is involved. Yes. So a channel related to history, okay? We'll say that. We also know that you are the host, and that you mentioned it has something to do with history, warriors, maybe historical warriors on a channel related to history, is what you're saying. And it brings in the context of historically, maybe what were they doing to train? And you, are an amateur historian, are talking about, the hopefully accurate, and definitely not even hopefully, I know that you would have done it right, viewpoint on all these different cultures. And then you're bringing on guests to speak to the science of it, of which I am one of, as well as 2 of my 3 mass colleagues, Drs. Trexler and Zordos. So that sounds pretty cool. And by the time this drops, it'll only be like a week away, unless it totally flops, and then we'll just be embarrassed about this episode.
Eric, you did a perfect job there, and I'm much more comfortable with you saying that. That's why you saw I was like dancing around it, just because I've never signed an NDA of that magnitude where I was like, this is a real serious thing. They're totally cool with me, but like anything else, let's use another hypothetical, like much bigger company, like Disney, right? Like, what do you think the whole joke about like Tom Holland, where they're joking where he leaks spoilers about Spider-Man, and they're like, haha, Tom, that's so cute, don't do it again. But the executives behind the scene are like, I will fucking kill you if you say it again. Right? So like, so it's not like that, but it's just the idea that you're respecting. Every single ask I've made, like what I said, I want these individuals, like here, I was able to reshape the show to my satisfaction. Every single ask they said yes to. So then basically what it is too, because they have to run it by all their executives and everything else, where it's greenlit. What do they call it? Not that it's I forget. There's some sort of.
I think it's greenlit, isn't it?
Or like greenlit, and then where it's in like it's basically it's going to premiere 100%.
In post.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
Like post-production. There's some sort of a word or phrase which means like it's absolutely premiering. We're almost there. So like, wouldn't it be funny? This would actually be amazing, Eric. If for whatever reason they have a test
completely
audience.
Canceled. Yep. So it's a pilot that never got turned into a show.
Exactly. So no, super interesting, man. But Eric, talk to me then about, because we've alluded to the cult, and that's why I think knowing when to exit is very important. Want to be gracious, to know that you did the damn thing and it's a work unto itself. And that's why I see this as a living body, a living embodiment, if you will, of us and our thoughts, a neat encapsulation of a time, but also that is wholly consistent, where I do think that anyone can like pick it up if you're on episode 1 and you work your way through. And it's like an experience where it has a beginning, middle, and end. I've witnessed, Eric, quite frankly, too many. I've been watching a lot of MMA during the pandemic. Really sad arcs, basically, that we both never want to commit, where you overstay your welcome of fighters, Eric, that like the dog has left them many years ago and they're doing it for a paycheck. It's very sad to see. Or like when people are producing content or like TV shows that they just run a few seasons too long.
We don't want to get to Rocky 5, folks, is what we're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. But another part of it is also just not wanting ourselves to be pathetic shells of our former glory, but also we want to make sure that this is beneficial to the subscriber, right? Yeah. I don't want you to be asking 2 years from now, so what was the smoke monster? Are you guys, the show's over. Screw you. I hate you, Lost Writers. So, yeah, and then the worst part is when you actually see an interview with the Lost Writers and they act like you're the idiot for not getting it and that it was all planned. And when they know they wrote themselves into a corner and then just like, oh, it's all a dream and they all died. Like, no, that was never the plan. You couldn't decide if it was monsters, magic, or aliens, and you just said none of the above. It was a surreal experience when you died. I am so mad about Lost still in 2021. No worries. But we're not going to do that to you, folks. We're not going to write ourselves into a corner. So let's just say, this is literally a conversation Omar had with me, which he brought up, and I totally agreed with, on the phone before we even filmed our first episode, that we're going to have a finite endpoint to iron culture, and then it's going to become something greater, better, beyond. I think Breaking Bad's a great analogy, because there has been, Better Call Saul. There was that, like a movie about Jesse.
Yep.
And I think that's really cool because it gives us little side angles. It gives more creative opportunities for the writers. And for an educational show like this, it gives us new opportunities for formats of disseminating information. So, like we joked at the beginning of this episode, we don't really want to be, knocking on Dr. Fundero's door in 2030 asking to do another episode about intuitive eating, and she's far beyond that. In fact, all of the globe has progressed beyond it, and we're still dealing in tropes from 15 years ago. We don't want to do that. You don't want us to do that. You wouldn't be here still if we were going to do that. So the plan is, and I'm not saying this is happening next year or even the year after, but when we feel collectively that we have finished this arc, we're going to do something better, bigger, but different. And I don't know what that's going to be, but it might be even longer form. Maybe it will be a little more formulaic and not formulaic, but I should say scripted, like you were talking about earlier, Omar. It might be something more documentary style. It could be something like a series where we tour different places, look more at the contemporary Iron Game realities of what's going on in different parts of the world, in different sectors and disciplines. So yeah, we're absolutely not done, but we do want you to know that there will be a time when this arc of the iron culture narrative closes, only to open upon new pastures.
And I think that's wonderful, because there's an excitement, there's a sense of adventure. I know when I discovered a few things that were current at the time, so you're right there on the bleeding edge, experiencing it, that it's a respect to the viewer, it's a respect to the listener, it's to remain faithful to the principles that we established at the inception of the cult, where the listener's first, right? So there are some people where, once again, they achieve some modicum of success, and that then repurposes what their purpose is, where it's like, well, now it's monetary compensation, which is why I joke with Eric, it's so funny, that when we're not financially benefiting, and I'm not trying to bring this up constantly, it just allows you to make freer choices, right? Because it's not like you're beholden to this, we've all had scenarios like that. Let's say where you have a job where it's your primary source of income and you lose that fire, but it's something that you depend on, or for whatever reason, right? Where you're looking at ways, and I do use that term, of weaponizing it to financially reimburse yourself. And there's nothing wrong with it. But when there is financial compensation, it then kind of complicates the picture a little bit by bringing about other considerations. Whereas for us, whereas like Eric, we did the damn thing. Have we done okay, let's look at every episode. He said diet culture, okay, metabolic adaptation, okay, all these cardio, that was a fantastic overview. Yeah, we've done 150, 200, 300 episodes on these topics, and that's how you do it. You did it, whoosh. And then the final, as you said, kind of Camino, what you brought up with Breaking Bad, where it doesn't mean that it's done forever necessarily. The podcast, that was the end. So that's an arc, kind of both of us. I read a lot of comics growing up, where you had with Silver Surfer, one of my favorite characters from the Marvel Universe. Norrin Rad's my guy. But anyways, Jim Starlin, he had his arc. So it was volume 2 of Silver Surfer, which to me is kind of the legendary run of a little series there. And that's that stamp of the Iron Cult, right? So it's you did that, that's the arc. 10 years from now, let's say, bro, the lifting industry becomes completely revolutionized. People discover that indeed, Eric, every single study that they managed to replicate for so many times was proven false. Carbohydrate timing is the most important factor. You can actually, a meme from 15 years ago emerges victorious. but you leave it open to the possibility, and you leave with the right way is what I'd say. Like, that's most important to me. And I think that's why people find it was so emotionally satisfying. And I bring up Breaking Bad because there's only a few like TV series I really watch. I watch more films, but it felt wholly consistent. And you could notice that. Just a real quick one. And then I want to get onto your reflections, man, for 2021. Would be, you could see that in comic books where Sandman, Neil Gaiman, when he wrote that, it's 75 issues. It is the tone, it's tonally, it's consistent. It makes sense. There's a beginning, middle, end. There's another series that I did enjoy the first like couple dozen issues, but I could tell Bill Willingham, I think is the writer, Fables, which is kind of in a similar vein. But basically he had an arc, Eric. It was supposed to run, once again, I'm making up, let's say like 70 issues. Felt like beginning, middle, and end. And then it ran for an additional 75 issues. And they do this all the time because, again, it's like you read manga, bro, and it's like we're on issue 1,000. I said, like, there are 100 issues worth of subject matter here, and you're on 984. No, like you've gone on 9 times too long.
Perfect example, and I know exactly what you're talking about, is actually the Punisher Max series.
Really?
So the Punisher, which kind of has grown again in popularity since the show that Shane from Walking Dead started, and he did actually a fantastic job. They did a great job, and they added a lot more modern complexities with veterans and gun violence to it. I thought it was really interesting. But anyway. So the Punisher has always been a very interesting character where he's really like a villain, vigilante, anti-hero all wrapped into one, tragic hero, if you will. And he's kind of like, it's basically Batman, but from the get-go breaking the rule of don't kill them. Like the only thing he does, he permanently ends the bad guys, and he's almost seen as like a force of nature in Marvel. But he doesn't have any powers. He's just a Vietnam. The original story, he is a Vietnam veteran whose family was killed by organized crime, and he became the Punisher. And he was special forces in Vietnam. And so in the various, how they do it in both DC and Marvel, they reboot the universe, so they make it constant. So obviously we can't have a Vietnam veteran in 2020. The dude would be like 80, right? But the Punisher Max series, so the Max version of Marvel back in the day in the comics was explicitly for adults, like it's 18 plus. So it's violent, it's gritty, it has real themes, like the Punisher goes after like human traffickers and stuff like that. And it is set in a very like low power version of the Marvel universe. Like there are hints of like they're out there, but most of the time you're dealing with there's no supervillains or superheroes. They're all the people with basically no powers, and there's occasional interaction. But they actually start, and this was written in the early 2000s. The Punisher is the same Punisher who was a Vietnam veteran.
Wow.
Right.
So he's like 50 arc at the time, or 60? What is it?
So the arc ends with him getting killed. He dies. Fighting the Kingpin and Bullseye, and he kills both of them, but then he succumbs to his wounds at the age of 60 after a 30-year war against crime. Yep. And it's not happy. It's super gritty. He's fought like every evil you could imagine, over this timeline, and it is intended to end. And that is actually going in parallel to like the main Marvel Universe Punisher, who has to interact with the crazy Marvel universe of the Avengers and everything, and who's been getting rebooted like multiple times, and has had really stupid arcs like becoming a vengeful angel and coming back with powers, getting turned into like an undead Frankenstein version of himself, and all these terrible decisions that have really ruined the essence of what Frank Castle was. But I will say to this day, if you want to get an idea of what is the essence of the Punisher, it's the Max, the Marvel Max, Punisher Max series run, and it encapsulates it perfectly, and it's really not going to go out of style because it has all the good, all the bad, all like the reflections on our society, all the issues. It's quite good.
Eric, the complexity we crave. Quick question for you, because I think I read a few of the issues. Do you know if the writer of the Max series, was it Garth Ennis or Enos?
Yes.
He saw. Yeah, he did Preacher and so forth. I read a few of them. So did he do? And then we're getting to it, Eric's reflections. was the Max series 30 years, or was it it picked up 30 years later and then it ran for what, 5 years? Like, what was the?
No, I can't remember how many years it was, but it wasn't a whole lot. But it was basically when they used the actual real life timeline of, okay, he's a Vietnam vet, he comes home, he's, you know, training special forces guys, and he's no longer active. His family gets killed, he becomes the Punisher. So that was set in like the late 70s. So since the late 70s, by the time the Max run ends in the mid 2000s, it is 30 years of him being the Punisher.
Got it.
So and they like acknowledge that, like and they like when they like find, you know, he's lying there dead, shot up, you know, after he, you know, lived through being mortally wounded and killed Kingpin and Bullseye, and also the Max version of these characters as well. So they're a little bit different because it's kind of like this more grittier, real version of the Marvel universe. I think it's fantastic.
Bro,
so.
Now you got me intrigued. There's going to be one person that listens to the call like, you should have said spoiler alert. I'm like, okay, we're talking about something that now probably, Eric, is it like 20 years old, 10 years old, at least 15 years?
Yeah, it's like 15 years old. So screw your spoiler alert.
Eric, talk to me, man, then about your reflections, because 2021 has been an interesting year. I have some thoughts, but I'm curious for yourself because I know. Have you revealed to the cult your plan to return? Like, I don't want to say it. Just talk to me, man.
Yeah. So 2021 was cool in that despite the fact that we, you know, so Delta came late to New Zealand, right? When everyone else was kind of dealing with it while they were, you know, vaccinating, it hit us, and we went into, in the Auckland area especially, a 100-day lockdown, roughly. And we only came out of it literally just as we're recording this 5 days ago.
Wow.
And that was because we hit the over 90% vaccination rate for the eligible population. And so we try to mitigate the potential harm of that. So, you know, Delta is in the population, or right now, as I talk about it, our cases are between like 100 to 200 a day for the whole country. So it's really not bad. And a large part of that still because our borders are closed. But a big thing I've had to do is two things. So on the that's relevant to the cult. So like on the professional front, as a research fellow at AUT, all of my PhD students, a number of which we've had on, like Ivan Jukic, Kedrick Kwan, their research has been put on hold, and they've had to, you know, adapt, like, you know, working on literature reviews, meta-analyses, surveys, things like that. Sohee Lee, who was on as well, you know, it's hit the whole globe because she's collecting data in the States, and she ran into issues as well, and she's collecting data a little later than intended. It is what it is. But the cool thing is now we're getting back into the lab. We're getting a refit of the Sprins labs for having more good technology, and I'm really excited about what's going to be going on in the future. A few of my students are actually getting to start now, but like proportionate part-time roles after they finish their PhDs at AUT. So I'm just really excited for the future of strength and physique-based research that's coming out of AUT, and being a part of that. So that's great. And so it's just exciting to be back in the lab. So that's one little cool arc. The other thing is 2021, I really wanted to kind of itch that powerlifting. I wanted to, you know, you don't itch a scratch. You scratch an itch, folks. Yeah. You knew that. So I'm scratching itches out here, and I hit a 500-pound squat, which was something that I've been trying to do for like literally almost a decade. So that was huge. Didn't actually get to do it on the platform because it was literally 4 days before New Zealand Nationals, which I was going to compete at. The lockdown occurred. So I did it in the garage, and I kind of proved to myself that, yes, I'm a competitor. Yes, I like to push myself, but I am not one of those folks who is so extrinsically motivated that they lose their passion to keep doing the damn thing. And like, I was super stoked. I followed my peaking plan. I quote unquote competed. I did, you know, I worked up to a max on the big three, and I hit a new PR total, hit a PR on squat and bench in my garage. You know, I did it to my best approximation of competition standards. And I think maybe a younger version of me would not have been satisfied with that, and would be like, well, I got to do another, like, it doesn't count unless I do. I need to do a meet. I need to do a meet, and I need to get a PR total. I need to squat 500, or I'm not satisfied. And I know a lot of people, they struggle with that as soon as they get into competing. And we've talked about this multiple times from kind of a behavioral psychology lens in the research that I'm aware of on that, that, you know, once you start rewarding extrinsic outcomes, it does threaten some of your internal motivators, and it can threaten your autonomy a little bit, and you don't get the same benefits from it. You might not have the same desire to keep lifting once you start lifting for medals or for placings or for PRs or what have you, when those things get taken away from you, which COVID has done to many of us, at least temporarily. So anyway, I was quite proud that not only did I follow through and, did the little mock meet, but I felt satisfied by it. And I was like, sweet, like I am not itchy anymore. I done scratched it. And now the goal is basically to probably not do any competitions that I actually train and peak for. Like I might jump in for fun into like, a Highland Games comp like I did in 2020, which was just a lot of fun, something to do with the friends, go out into a field, throw some rocks and try to flip a caber. That might be fun, something just to do on a random, Saturday. We'll see. But my plans are actually to not compete until 2023 when I want to get back on the bodybuilding stage. The only regret I have about that is that I think Jeff, Berto, and possibly Brad are all going to get on stage in 2022. And it's going to be a really competitive year because the last couple of years, people couldn't compete. So you basically, the way it works in natural bodybuilding, because people typically take extended off seasons, is like every other year tends to be a different crop of competitors. So you often kind of have like the greats missing each other. And so sometimes like in the pros, especially, they'll ask each other like, hey, when are you getting back on stage? Because I want a rematch type of thing, which is kind of cool. It's very much in this true spirit of competition where everyone wants each other to be at their best. Not the person who enters like, the Masters 3 police only men's physique novice division just so they can get a trophy, figuring out where there's no other competitors. But like real competitive bodybuilding where you seek out the big shows with the biggest competitors and you push each other to be better so that, the whole sport gets better. So anyway, that's happening in 2022, but I know I just need more time to make progress. I think I would look exactly the same as 2019, honestly, or imperceptibly different. And the feedback I got, from being in pretty damn good shape from, June onwards was I just need to be bigger, So like, that's not going to get solved by dieting. So I really want to dedicate all of 2022 to just growing, and I've been really enjoying pushing weights in ways that I think are the best for sustainably building muscle, instead of, building muscle while also pissing off my neck, my shoulder, my hips. It basically sounds like the hokey pokey if I talk about all the aches and pains I have. But no, like for example, I swapped out overhead press for like a landmine press, and it's like, this is fantastic, little things like that, and playing a lot with my cables. Of course, still doing some barbell lifts. Like I'm not trying to get weaker necessarily, but really just enjoying the process of having a proper like old school, let's get huge bodybuilding kind of off season. Not that I'm like eating uncontrollably or gaining weight super fast, but anyway, 2022, the goal is eat food, lift weights, get yacked, and then diet down for 2023.
Eric, I had to say, one, you're looking quite strong, my friend, but I think there's something to be said over this experiment 2020 into 2021 where you kind of, whether you wanted to or not as a lifter, you're able to reflect onto yourself, what motivates you, what is the thing that gets you in the gym, what keeps you in the gym, what pushes you to try and be better. And one of the revelations I had, and I could see this absolutely for you, is that you have a strong internal purpose so that when you train in your basement, like you're getting after it. I'm actually convinced, like I know you say like you compete in all those things. Those are, I think for you being scientifically inclined, you want an objective marker where we all, let's be honest, like when I squat, like I'm going to probably cut a little depth, like this, that, the other thing. You just want that ability for something outside of yourself to say like, check mark.
I want to objectively have 7 people subjectively rate my physique so that I can validate whether I have a good physique or not. I think that everyone understands that. It makes total logical sense.
Oh man. But like for some people it is obvious. It could be multifaceted. So it's like you want the win. So you're directly competing against other people. The point with you, I think you don't need like the W in order to keep you in the gym. And what I noticed, I'll say this very quickly, because I do want to talk about your physique in 2019. I'm being serious when I say this, is that I actually prefer training alone or with a very good training partner. So like my boy Jeff, shout out to him, or like my brother, I've been training with a lot. And I became habituated, Eric, to training on my own. And it's something I really enjoy because there's almost a flow state that one achieves. So there's a few things that happen, man. As we spoke about before, I turn on that airplane mode. And so there's no work. And I am that person, whether or not I could separate it, where there's a lot of things going on. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Not as an excuse, but just I have a tendency, if my music player is my phone, I must be productive while I'm training. And whether or not you think you can separate it, you really can't. There's some percentage it will detract from your training. So training quality, and even Yvonne was talking about that, like intent when you lift and all those other things, has been so much higher that validation of like you go to the gym and people are like, yeah, man, looking great. Or they want to chat. It's like, I'm not all business, but I'm in a flow state where I'm just in the zone. I'm comfortable. And even the type of music, what's interesting to me, Eric, is that when I'm in a gym environment, I'll probably listen to more aggressive music because I'm kind of like siloing out everyone. So I'm just zoning in on what I'm doing. And so it's like getting in that zone, getting more of an adrenaline hype. Whereas when I train on my own, it's almost another system that you recall where I refer to as that flow state, where you're just in this position where everything's locked in. So you don't need, there's not that increased demand on your mental fortitude that's necessary in order to produce the set. Cause you're thinking I'm here, like, let me put it on. Yeah. Like, let me lift. And then like you're talking, it's like, man, the talking is a distraction. When you really think about it, it's like when you're just on your own, you're kind of dialed in at all times. If that's your personality, that is definitely my personality. I've discovered that. And that's something that I thought I had, but I wasn't sure which way, because I also enjoy talking with friends while I lift, but the quality of the training suffers. So it's like, what are you really here for, right? And there is that thing. I see that with you, man. I got to give a shout out to you and Alberto. And then when you guys train, we actually did it because we're filming, once again, content. So it's one of those things, Eric, where both things are happening at once. We're doing content, but we're also like sneaking in a session. But I could tell you have it. And when I say it, I mean that training focus, the quality of the training. People associate, and that's why they'll say train harder or train with intensity, but it's a directed aim. So it's like a singular focus as you're lifting that isn't necessarily like an RPE so much as it's an intentional state of mind. That thing gets understated by some people. So I saw that with you, man. I saw that with Alberto. Real quick, I want to go to the 2019 Physique to say, like, I'm not even being funny here, that when I saw you, and you were there, you were at, obviously you competed, but then you're also at Alan's gym, Untamed Strength. I was very impressed. I have seen people compete in natural bodybuilding around like stage condition, let's say, where they're in the gym. And of course it goes without saying, like anything else, I joke when I say bodybuilding, it's a bit of an illusion where you're purposely posing in a certain way and all those other things. For my eyes, like when I saw you at Untamed, you just look good. You look good without the lights, like without all the fancy lights, without the particular angle. Like you clearly, I think the thought that I had in my head, and this sounds like the hater in me, but it's just the way that I am, is that sometimes when I saw some other natural bodybuilders, and everyone has their own potential, like, man, what, I'm going to take a look at myself. I see their physique, I see their conditioning, and I think to myself, like, wow, like this is a really good manipulation of certain variables to put forth the best possible package. But in like a real world, like competitive, just like, yeah, man, like let's stand you up next to someone. It's like you really rely on those variables, the lighting, the angle, and everything else to show a particular package. Whereas I think if you're to compare it across a population, like the physique that you brought, not only the level of leanness, but the overall muscularity. And that's why I find it funny. Like, I get it. Like, it's bodybuilding. Like, yeah, everyone's got to get bigger. It's like, there's no way someone could just show up like this and like diet down. Like, this is a body of work, is kind of what I thought. So that's what that was honestly, man, my personal impression. Whereas you do see some physiques where it's like, man, that person got shredded. The muscularity is not super high, but it's a fortitude, but it's something someone goes through. And then I saw your physique and I was like, that is a certain amount of time you can't bypass. And even people that are genetically like really blessed, it's like, you kind of can't just walk and look like that. Like it doesn't happen. So there's no way of looking like what you did without a certain amount of either effort, dedication, and discipline over a prolonged period of time. And I think subconsciously, like the brain understands that because it's unusual, like how good the person looks.
Well, thank you. That's the first thing I want to say. And I think, yeah, I'm at the point now where at the level that I want to be competitive at, that's like the door check.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Are you complete? Do you just look good? Like you don't have any glaring flaws and you have a level of muscularity that people just don't wake up with unless they have like literally 1 in a million genetics. Yeah. And then the competition starts. So yeah, I think that's why I'm like, and I need another 4 years before I get back on stage.
Sure.
So yeah, it's it's a rough world out there in the pro ranks in natural bodybuilding, but I'm going to rise to the challenge and hopefully at least get WNBF pro status to then get dunked on. And I'd be pretty happy with that, because a big part of it for me is kind of the I know we use the term objective, which isn't the perfect description for bodybuilding, but actually, you know what it is. So we had Dan John on one of our first 10 episodes with Matt and Susie Gary, because I think Dan John is kind of like an example of what's at the heart of iron culture.
Sure.
One of his great books is called Can You Go? And that really encapsulates the attitude of competing. Like, it's the exact opposite of Instagram, where you can curate the appearance of a performance. You can repost your best performance and make it seem like it happened yesterday. You can take not only something that was set up with a peak week and perfect lighting, stage lighting, but you can also add structure to it. And you can selectively remove the shots where you don't look your best. And you can give that impression, like you said, Omar, like, that's impressive, but I do feel like all the stars need to align for you to look good. Or at the way that you're presenting what is normal, which I know is not. And Can You Go? And then you read like the introduction to that book. He was recounting times in his youth as a thrower or as a coach of throwers, where someone might have an injury or be ill, or they're going to show up 3 minutes before they actually need to throw, and none of those things matter. The question is, can you go? So, like you always joke about the power lifter, the classic meme level of just joke about it. Like, come on, why do you got to be a stereotype of yourself? Powerlifting post of, despite all these things, I still did okay in the gym today. It's really kind of acknowledging that none of that matters when it comes to competition. You don't get to post about it. The judges don't care. You either hit depth or you didn't. You got those numbers or you didn't. You came on stage and you looked better than the other people, or you didn't, period. And I feel like if someone, not that you have to do that, and there are people who I tremendously respect who never compete, but the aspect of competing that I appreciate is it gives me a sense of competence and autonomy and control. And it lets me know, like, I am, to some degree, in this world that we have very little control in, a master of my own destiny. Like, I know how to manipulate my training, my nutrition, and my mental state more than anything else, so that I can be good on this day that I didn't get to choose. That's a show. Like, I had to, it would be great if it was 2 weeks later, or in August instead of July, or in my country that I live in, so I don't have to fly out to it and cross like the northern to southern hemisphere or whatever. It would be great if it wasn't 5 days after the conference presentation I'm doing in the UK, and then I'm trying to come back and compete in New Zealand. So I think what you were talking about, how I'm pretty good at kind of turning it on in the gym, that's something I developed early on, kind of that focus and being obsessive. But what I've gotten better at now is not thinking like I need to tighten down and like I have to, like, don't bug me. I need to be at the gym at this time. I need to have my pre-workout meal. I need to have this pre-workout shake, and I need my workout partner to show up on time. And I hope no one's on the hack squat or my leg press is going to be terrible. Like, I do put a lot of effort into creating the right environment for me to perform at my best. But I also understand now that most of that is the mentality. Like, can you be like, here's where I am. I'm training at Fortis because I'm traveling and I don't know the equipment here, but whatever equipment that is here, I'm going to put forth the effort I need to today under the constraints of what I have to do it, So I think competition breeds that, because there are so many variables that you cannot control, and learning to focus on what you can and find a way to where you're improving, that's all there is. And you can look at your competition history and say, when the chips are down, have I improved? And I think sometimes you can look at your logbook or pictures, or you can change your goals. You can move laterally. You can do all these things to where you can manipulate yourself into rationalizing a 10-year plateau sometimes if you don't have competitions. Not that you need it, though. I think, Omar, you're a great example of someone who has made steady progress into their experienced years as someone who's never gotten on the platform or the stage. And I think that, like I said, it speaks to the internal drive of someone, and you don't need to compete. But I think competitions are something that kind of force you into a position of self-evaluation where it's not in your hands and you have to figure it out and show up on game day. And then, like Dan John asked the question, can you go? And the answer is either yes or no.
Eric, the mythical first competition that was to be with strongman, because we spoke about this, and I do think revisiting an episode where you spoke about aches and pains, because I'll just share a little bit. We won't keep this episode too long. It is very cool, man. Just to reflect with you, reflect with the cult, participate, and what we will do. We're totally not taking a page out of the Stronger by Scientology podcast. Is maybe we'll organize with our YouTube channel something that when I say interactive, it would be an episode then where we could maybe field some of the questions and whatnot, like where we do a Q&A live. But this is kind of like it is top down where we're speaking to the cult, but it also is the synthesis of all the conversations and comments I've seen by people. I do think it would be a poignant episode for us to revisit, not the like aching as you age, like what do you do as a lifter, but more just some of the like what goes into that decision making for you where you choose one exercise over another. And I think that's something, because we like to have these neat reductionist takes, Eric, where it's like, oh, like the barbell is the cure. Like, I'm like, you could do the barbell with that. I'm like, yes and no. It's like one of my favorite videos on my channel was the one where we talked about your quad hypertrophy and then the choices you made, how to continue to basically make gains where the limiting factor was just sticking to a particular compound movement, the squat, and that if you're so attached to that, either as your identity or your strength being a large part of your identity, it would have been to the detriment of your overall leg hypertrophy. And that's one of those conversations where people, like, when they reduce it down, the calories just calories. Like, okay, like, yeah, for sure. Like, we're having this conversation, like, we're in it. These are like neat little heuristics, but it's like a barbell, like, just like work past, or like, all you need to do for leg growth is a squat. It's like at this point, we're actually kind of losing some of that. Once again, the fidelity of that information. Like, there's some noise entering there. Where is that true in all possible worlds? Absolutely not. Yep. Is it even true the majority of the time? Like, probably, like, maybe it's not as true as the people that use it as a platitude. And I think you being a coach, also in academia, to have that conversation, I'm just back pocketing that for something in 2022, because I relate to that, man. What I was going to say very quickly, besides that competition, where the excitement of doing something new, so it's novel, like strongman, would produce that necessary focus, where it's like you have to show up on game day. But it's not like powerlifting, where in no world, Eric, like I joke when I say this, would I be happy without, even if I hit PRs across the board, it's like I kind of have already visualized this. I'm within the distance, and then to get the approval, like, it's good. But for the amount of years I've spent, it's not like, oh wow. Whereas even, like, I will say this, like, I'm not committing. Like, strongman was the thing I was committing to. Like, even bodybuilding, I've never been that lean. Like, that is when we talk standard deviations, you know what I'm saying, Eric, of leanness, I've never even approached that. Like, the best case in a powerlifting competition is I maybe PR like 5 kilos more than I thought I had, right? Like, and I'm not trying to downplay that. Like, 5 kilos for an advanced lifter is a big deal. But bro, like, going from my 11% body fat to actually competing in bodybuilding is a night and day. And I recognize that. Like, that is a whole other level.
It doesn't feel like you're like doing a powerlifting meet for you is not going after the white whale that you've never been able to find. It's kind of like going to the same cafe you normally go to, and instead of ordering a flat white, you get a latte. So yeah, it's not that different. I totally get it. And I think strongman would be really cool for you, because there's a head-to-head competitive aspect. It's more about the events on the day, who shows up, and you can adapt the movements to your body. So there's just an element that it will be unknown no matter what until you actually do the event. And I also think it just you're just gonna be more competitive. You know, like Olympic lifting, you'd be good, but you can't lock out your arm. You don't need to do that in strongman. As long as it's lockout-ish, you'll get a down command. Also, your squats have been getting higher and higher and higher, and they don't care about squats. That's not really like in any version of a squat you'll have to do will require like that kind of depth.
Oh, it's half squat, bro. Strongman's perfect for me. They all say I got Scottish hips, so that's what I'm going to say. My name's Omar, and I have Scottish hips, bro.
My name is Omar Yusuf. I have Scottish hips.
I have Scottish hips. What I was going to say is that I do think moving forward, it's one of those things where for 2021, it was one of my best training years, and then one of the setbacks, that is one of the things I'll say briefly, is sometimes being too reductionist can actually be detrimental. And I experienced slowly over time a loss of function, basically, more in particular in my right arm. And what I mean when I say that, for anything that I do for the big three, like, you squat, bench, deadlift, and you also do the overhead press, it's no problem. That's why some people say, like, oh, like, your lockout, where I couldn't straighten my arm. So there's like 5, maybe 10 degrees loss. So I couldn't perfectly straighten out my right arm. It slowly decreased over time. it wasn't affecting anything lifting wise, but guess what, Eric? As soon as I try to do something more dynamic, so I decided, I spoke with, shout out to Phil DeRue. I did some MMA, just some like light Muay Thai like a decade ago. I wanted to get back into that because I thought, you know what, Eric, I'm bulking. It's a fun little conditioning tool. Wouldn't you know it, when I threw out a jet, and it wasn't like an incorrect technique, but literally because I can't lock out, when I straighten my arm, when it's still bent, it feels like hyperextension. And so you throw a jab and it feels natural, like I'm a southpaw, so it means with my right hand I'm throwing it. It feels like I'm not even straightening it out, but it still is the same kind of end result, like a hyperextension. So you get fluid in the joint, a little bit of bursitis, this and that. Anyways, point is, I had chosen movements that allowed me to continue to lift, which was good. So strength, hypertrophy, unaffected. But in terms of what you can do that's dynamic outside the gym, slowly over time, by not addressing it, it got worse and worse. And that's one of the things that I would say that to me is of a supreme importance, is to maintain overall function. And some of the choices we make, like that's why when we joke, Eric, like the calculus behind the curtain for lifters is like, you don't want to be that power lifter where you're in your 40s or like, it does it. You could be in your 20s, you could be in your 30s, but where like you're not doing all the things you could do because like, oh, I can't sumo deadlift anymore or whatnot. Like I got this groin issue that I never addressed. And then it's not just like, yo, bro, biopsychosocial model pain, lift through it. Like this, like the elbow, it's a mechanical dysfunction, right? Like at play here. Like you can't just straighten it out more. Like if you keep pressing with it, it'll eventually straighten. I'm like, that's not how it works. Like they're actually, to use the thing that it's probably not, but I told you the osteochondritis, like that's like a little bone spur that might be, I think Brett Gibbs had something similar. There could be something actually limiting it. If you don't address it, then either it'll stay the same or it'll regress over time. So I think longevity, if I had to say one thing entering 2022, and that's why I loved what you said, man, because I know with you, like you had surgery, and that to me is a hardcore lifter. And that's, I want to save that for another episode. I'll just wrap up with this, man. But you're making the choices so you stay in the game because you understand, Eric, not only because you enjoy participating in the game, but if you want to maximize your attributes, eventually, like that theoretical point, like let's say 40 years old competing in bodybuilding, I don't think that's your max, but you know you need more years. So it's like a self-survival mechanism, choosing to be robust and trying to problem solve things as they arise, rather than, I think there's a naive notion now that's kind of emerged in some of the lifting space of, yeah, I agree, not catastrophizing, but then there's also like the lift through it crowd where you're not where you were and you're just like kind of ignoring it. And that's not the same as solving it. Like basically choosing to not acknowledge a problem isn't the same also as solving it, right?
Yeah. The biopsychosocial model doesn't mean it's the psychosocial model. And it also doesn't mean you just ignore the bio and you assume it's psychosocial. You have to deal with the potential that there is a legitimate mechanical, biomedical issue, and that you will have a psychosocial response to it and interactions so that you address it all. So yeah, in my case, and we won't get into it, I legitimately had anatomical blocks so that I couldn't hit depth without having significant pain. And when they were removed, I was pretty solid after rehab. So yeah, and I do understand that, 50% of the people who get surgery don't have that experience. So I'm not saying anything on either side. I don't think there are sides, but I do think you have to address each person on an individual basis. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing. And I think it'd be good for the cult to know as you progress, hopefully you progress, your experience with it and how it goes and how you work around it. And I'm sure you'll have some useful wisdom to share with them in 2022.
My man, Eric. I think another episode, like we bring on so Dr. Sam Spinelli, shout out to him. He's been helping me. Where just the idea where I do think it's still ephemeral, like the idea of physiotherapy, where once again, it's kind of like lift through it. Like the general things also do apply, Eric, where it's like, okay, so lifting heavy hurts it. Go with the lighter load. Okay. Reduce the range of motion. A lot of it's very intuitive, like most of the checks, and like it's largely true. But I kind of feel that, at least it's been my experience, most lifters, if you've lifted over a decade, you probably have certain issues that it's not just simply like a load management tool where it's like an easy, okay, like let's go to the check mark. Like it's like a check engine system. It's like, nah, this thing's fucked. Like, nah, I gotta address it. So I think just having one, shout out Nicola Camelli and whatnot for another episode, a revisit of 2022 would be good.
100% agree.
Awesome, man. Well, Eric, is there anything you want to say in closing, either by yourself, to the cult, anything at all?
I guess I just want to say, you may have felt like we came to the end of this episode and there wasn't like a topic du jour, and that's okay. Like if this wasn't your episode, that's all good. But for those of you who this was your episode, you enjoyed just hanging with Mr. Helms and Mr. Isuf and having us talk about this year in review. We appreciate you, and thank you for being on this ride with us. Can't believe it's been damn near 3 years and of episodes, and actually spanned 3 years it has, and that we're at the end of 2021 heading into 2022. Yeah, so just big thanks to the listeners, and yeah, keep on listening, and we'll keep on doing our thing, and it will evolve and progress from here.
Eric, so well said. And now that I've been sedated, I do want to reissue an apology to Mr. Mem Cockburn for just coming on a little too strong. Just because of that, Stuck Together was really top of the mind. And then I read that comment, and I wasn't trying to insinuate, we want full kind of willingness of participation of that said bodybuilding. That's the thing I didn't stress. It's like, do you want to compete in this bodybuilding show, of which we're the only 2 judges? Yes or no? If yes, then this is what would happen, right?
Right. So there's consent involved.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good.
Just to clarify. But yeah, other than that, it has been a wild and crazy ride the last 3 years. I am looking forward to the future. I do think there are a few different things, stay tuned, dear listener, that the cult will be doing just in terms of engagement and other things to spice it up, but also I think to enhance the overall experience. So thank you so much for... it's 150. It technically would be 156 when we're, the 3 year mark. So we're almost basically there, but 156. You're like, oh, shout out 3 years. People are like, well,
terrible landmark. Right. 150 is way better.
Bro. Terrible. Yeah, we had like a 100th episode commemoration. Come on. It wasn't 104. But I want to thank everyone for listening, and we look forward to the next few years. You could go ahead and help us by leaving a rating and review on iTunes. We'll go ahead and continue to read some of those. We appreciate every single one of you. You know the rating you got to give. It's 5 stars. We'll catch you in that next episode every single Monday.